shot the interview. No, go ahead, start over.
Okay, so what sparked your interest to find out the history which was concealed from you?
I really didn't start out on a quest to look for history. I really started out on a quest. I looked around my family, I looked around my community. I was born in Los Angeles, raised in the 80s, where it was high gang, the rise of crack, and my family members and my community members were caught up in that, and I was trying to look for an explanation on why our community was the way it was, and that led me to history, it led me to sociology, it led me to studying economics, and studying all these different factors that go into how communities are shaped, how they're formed, what interests are involved in marginalizing certain communities, what interests are involved in giving privilege to other communities. That's how I came across it, just a curiosity of trying to figure out why my family and why my community was in the condition that it was in.
Okay. And so what are your thoughts on the perception of African and black culture? Because I know that you were saying in your lecture yesterday that these are two different things that need to be in their own kind of, African, that's what we all are, but sometimes, like you gave an example of, you go to a town and you want to find the church because you want to be black, but if you want to really accept the history that you have, then you're African, or like if you can kind of...
Well, that's kind of what I was saying. What I'm saying is that cultural groups are, for the most part, when you organize people by those things, the reason why they are because they have either customs or they have practices or they may have some other ties, but one of the most important ties that they have is worldview. They have a way in which they move through the world. And what we see is that no matter how people are shifted around and where they're moved around, that a large percentage of the people keep their worldview, even if they're either colonized or they're enslaved, they still approach the world in the way that they do. So that's why the black church is the black church, because we brought Africa into a European system. So we brought the way in which we worship. So you go to a black church, and for the most part, they're going to dance. Well, in European churches, there was no dancing, but we dance when we worship. So what I was saying was that our community, what I was saying was, one, that those of us who are still stuck in this identity crisis, we know that we're quote-unquote black, and we embrace being black when it's a social opportunity. But we have cognitive dissonance when it comes to being black, when it's talking about politics, economics, race relations, and things of that nature. All of a sudden, we want to be kumbaya. We want to be, I don't see color. And that's because when you're part of the group who's always been on the short end of the stick on the conversation, you want to avoid that conversation. And we've always been the losers in the discussion about race. We've always been the marginalized. We've always been the ones who were enslaved or segregated against. So we were very uncomfortable with those. So we just want to hurry up and get over that conversation. Let's talk about something else. But we do know that in social settings that we are black, and we look for those things. So that's the point I was trying to make. But what I'm trying to get people to understand is that the reason why we need people of all cultural backgrounds, whatever you're from, to be able to come to the table and embrace the cultural background they come from is because one cultural group doesn't have a solution to all the problems that the world has. And if everybody is trying to be European, the European doesn't have the answers to all of the problems. We need some people that have a perspective that may be from a Native American background. We need the way in which they viewed the world. We need some African worldviews. We need some Asian worldviews. We need worldviews from people across the board to be able to solve the problems that we have in the world. But if everybody in the world is told you have to be like a European man, then we lose out on options, we lose out on solutions, we lose out on opportunities. One way in which that's demonstrated, if you watch the movie called Something the Lord Made, and it's about a black man in the Depression times who serves as an assistant to a doctor at Johns Hopkins University, and they're both talking about solving this problem. While the European guy is talking about how everything in the body is separate, the black guy is talking about how everything is unified. And in that conversation about how everything is unified, they actually come up with a solution to the problem. Two different worldviews. You understand what I'm saying?
Definitely.
That helped them solve a problem that they both were working on. Now, maybe in another situation, that guy's perspective would have helped. But it's a movie about a guy named Vivian Thomas. He's played by Mos Def.
Nice. Definitely. Okay, yeah, you explained it a lot better than when I presented it, so I thank you for that. Now, can you speak on the disinformation which has been given to the younger generations?
Well, disinformation is a strategy to control people. People who have certain kinds of interests, which normally interest ties to wealth or money, people who have these things, they try to find strategies in which to do these two things that may seem diametrically opposed initially, but they actually work together. One is to make human beings feel isolated, to make you feel like you're all alone in everything, and that you're the only one that has the challenges that you have. You're the only one that has the thoughts that you have. So you could be in a room, a crowded people, and still be lonely, while simultaneously making you feel like you're a part of a group. And the way that they want you to feel part of a group is not because of a cultural loyalty or a loyalty to humanity as a whole or a loyalty to improving humanity. They want you to feel like you're part of a group that's associated with a brand. So the disinformation is to say you're isolated, something's wrong with you, you have all these insecurities, something's wrong with your hair, something's wrong with your skin color, something's wrong with your weight, something's wrong with your height, and you know what? We got a product to sell you, and it's going to solve these things. And then every time you feel like you got a product to solve that, then they got another product. Well, the reason why you're not getting the ladies is because you don't have the right shoes. We got some shoes for you. The reason why you're not getting the right man because you don't have the right purse. We got the purse for you. And so that's where you have this disinformation. Now, put that in a political context. You give people disinformation and you give them conflicting and confusing information is because to have a politically astute and aware group of people allows them not to make decisions off of their insecurities or off of being conspicuous consumers. But now you have a person who can think critically and process information and say, you know what, my humanity is not based on the shoes that I wear. My humanity is not based on the car that I drive. And you can't have that in a society. But as long as you keep people confused about what positions are, what the real issues are, and who actually are the power players, then you really don't have to worry about too much backlash or too much people standing up against the system, because people at a certain point won't even be able to identify what quote-unquote the system is, because they think they voted or they have access to the vote, so they're in a democracy.
So in order to combat this whole kind of corporate agenda that's been pushed on to us, what would you say would be the best thing, except like going further off the critical thinking?
Well, the best thing is for people at a very practical level, is people who have some kind of awareness in their local areas, schools, campuses, or whatever, is to start study groups, to get together the handful of people who have similar interests and say, hey, let's start a study group, and we're going to go from certain books. If you're interested in, the global economy, you might get, what is it, Confessions of an
Economic Hitman.
Economic Hitman, something like that. Or, if you're interested in something that's cultural, then you might look at a history book that gives the background of that particular group. And so that's one thing, is because study groups and self-teaching is going to be the key situation. For us to depend on something that's external or something that's created to maintain the status quo to give us the information we need is going to be problematic. Another thing is to be creative in all these various social networks we use. So if we're going to try to enlighten our friends that are kind of not interested in these kind of issues, then we use our Facebook and our Twitter to maybe post a link to Democracy Now! That turns them on to Democracy Now! We post a link to the magazine The Nation and all these other kinds of progressive journals. We post things that are culturally relevant. So if there's a whatever history month, everybody has a history month now. During that month, that's a time when people accept you feeding them information, because you have that space and time. So if it's Women's History Month, bombard them with information about women. If it's Hispanic Chicano History Month, blah, 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 over and over again. And so on my Facebook page, every single day of Black History Month, I just post a new profile of a different person, and it's accepted because it's Black History Month. So people who normally wouldn't be inclined, I'll be like, why are you posting this? They have a relationship. So you have to be creative on those levels. I don't recommend that people go into classrooms and necessarily combat professors, because that's not the setting for that. What we're really trying to do is something that's a little bit more organic, something that's a little bit more self-contained. Because when you start going in and challenging professors, you start going in and arguing with these people who have control over your academic career, you're just setting yourself up. One, you're overexposing yourself. And two, you're not going to win in that setting because they have all the power in that relationship. So we have to understand power dynamics. But when you go and you start your own study group, when you grow and you politicize the organizations that you're a member of, and you make sure you furnish them information, when you do like you're doing, when you start your own kinds of publications and start to follow in that tradition of independent publications, then you're actually really making some kind of difference.